Post-colonial theory. Post-colonial theory is concerned with the ways in which texts shape our understanding of the colonized world, both historically and in the present. This includes physical settlement of other territories, colonialism, the wider cultural control of the developing world by European powers, imperialism, and the reworking of these methods of control in the contemporary world, neo imperialism and neo colonialism. Let's now get these terms right. Colonialism is the physical settlement of one country by another. Imperialism is the dominance of one country by another through trade and cultural influence with or without settlement. Neo imperialism and neo colonialism describe the continuance of colonialism and imperialism in the 20th century and beyond after the ending of a formal colonial period. The emphasis on literary theories in post colonialism comes from its founding text, Orientalism, written by Edward Said. Said's book brought the theorizing of post colonial relations into mainstream. His method is heavily influenced by Foucault and his idea of discourse. He argues that the West imagined the Orient as an inferior other. In his later work, Culture and Imperialism, Syed addresses specifically the reading of colonial texts. He argues that the post colonial critic must read against the grain of texts for their absences, for what is not said. For this practice, Syed evokes a musical term. He describes this as contrapuntal reading. Contrapuntal reading is similar to post-structuralist ideas of trace and difference, the idea of reading a text for the voices silenced by the narrative. The idea of the West's imagining of the colonized world and its populations is central to post-colonial theory. In her book Imperial Eyes, Mary Pratt considers how European travel writing contributed to imagining and othering the developing world. Robert Young, in his work Colonial Desire, explores how colonial medical and religious discourses imagined and othered the colonized body. Paul Carter's The Road to Botany Bay explores how colonialism imagined the colonial territories as blank spaces to be conquered. The title The Empire Writes Back points to this possibility, examining how authors writing from developing world nations have critiqued the effects of colonialism in their writings. In her later work, Tiffin has discussed this in terms of post-colonial counter-discourse, the ways in which writers challenge colonial narratives and the worldviews they perpetuate with directly focused and explicitly intertextual alternatives. Novels such as Rice's Wide Sargasso Sea, Coetzee's Foe, and Phillips's The Lost Child engage in a deconstructive contrapuntal process to reveal the silenced blackness of Bertha, Friday, and Heathcliff. In doing so, ask readers to rethink the ideological effects of many classic works of literature. In her book Realism and Consensus in the English Novel, Elizabeth Emmath examines how the realist novel encourages a certain agreement among readers. It drives plots towards a particular conclusion and encourages readers to accept its Eurocentric worldview. As a result, many postcolonial texts provide alternatives to realism. The magic realist form is particularly prevalent in postcolonial novels, chosen for its ability to remake realism and infuse it with developing world myths and traditions. In her groundbreaking essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, Spivak attempts to bring together Marxist and post structuralist influences. The focus of the essay is the subaltern, defined as that subject entirely without a voice. The embodiment of this subject for Spivak is the lower class colonized woman. Spivak's essay criticizes post structuralist philosophy for claiming that it can represent the voice of the subaltern subject. In particular, it challenges the work of Deleuze and Michel Foucault to say that Derrida's thinking, which is most useful for trying to understand the subaltern position. This, for Spivak, is because Derrida does not attempt to represent the subaltern subject, but rather focuses through his analysis of language on understanding exactly what representation means. In her critique, Spivak also draws on Marxist criticism to illustrate the material suffering of the subaltern subject and arguing that this cannot be ignored. The most famous part of her essay is its final pages. Here, Spivak attempts to answer the question, can the subaltern speak? By this, she is not, of course, asking whether the subaltern can actually speak. What she means is, can the subaltern subject have a voice that is heard? Her example in this respect is the issue of sati, the traditional Indian Hindu practice of widows killing themselves on the death of their husbands. Spivak relates that during the colonial period in India, when the ruling British attempted to outlaw the practice, their colonized male subjects upheld it as a symbol of Indian nationalism. What resulted was white men saving brown women from brown men. But nowhere was there a space for women's voices to be heard. As a result of this, Spivak concludes that the subaltern cannot speak. Her voice is taken up by others who claim to speak for her, but the truth of her experience is unavailable to us. Graham Hagan argues that the idea of post colonial literature both upholds and is upheld by particular stereotypes about the colonized world that come both from readers and publishers. In the post colonial exotic, Hagen criticizes Western critics and publishers for suggesting that texts offer a truth about the post colonial world and that readers can, through reading them, have an authentic experience of the developing world. He contrasts this with the ways in which Anglo American texts are read, not as representative but as fictions. Hagen suggests that there is a particular type of post-colonial literature promoted by publishers that has become very popular with Western readers. This literature is often rooted in magical realist tendencies, which for Hagen create the sense of the developing world as strange and different and as an exotic. In doing so, they affirm Orientalist thinking by encouraging readers to think not of the similarities between their own world and the one they are reading about, but rather to focus on the supposed differences.